So, good morning, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here today, along with Vanessa Córdoba and with all of you to mark the International Women's Day and everything we do and all the progress in the field of women, all of that is worth highlighting. And today we thought we would stage this event focused on football because we have 2 years of football ahead. We have the Men's World Cup this year and the Women's World Cup in Brazil next year. It also offers a lens through which I think we can connect to other audiences too, as through football we can understand about inequalities, progress, advances, and I think it is that field that lets us find common issues and people from different places and with different mindsets and ideological perspectives, we can all connect. And Vanessa Cordova is just right in this context. She was 6 years ago at the bank. You may have met her, followed her on social media, or you may have seen her as a goalkeeper. Others may not know her. So I'll tell you who Vanessa Cordova is and why she's here. She comes from Colombia. That is a very important point to make. She is a professional football player. She's a communicator and she develops narratives on football, sports, social inclusion, and leadership. She is a professional player and has already played in Colombia, in Mexico, in Turkey, in Spain. She has been part of the Colombia national team and is today on a new team, something that I look forward to hearing about, which has to do with precisely betting on a new football team, Internacional de Bogotá. So let's get started and talk. Let's try and make the rules of the game clear. This is a conversation, it's spontaneous, just feel free. And of course, if you'd like to uh, answer any questions as well. The idea is that at the end, those of you should feel free to ask any questions, whether here or online. So, Vane, for those of you who haven't seen you in 6 years, what's been going on ever since the last time you came? What's been going on with you and in your field generally? So, so what we've seen, well, I'm 30 already and trying to deal with it. I played in Mexico. I played in Turkey in the last 6 years. There were, of course, completely different experiences. I had lived in Turkey as a kid, and of course, it was one experience as a 9-year-old living with my parents, and it was quite different coming back as an independent woman to play football in Turkey. I've worked in media outlets, trying to also carry the narratives and discussions to a more mass level, aside from social media, which I've always tried to use to that end. And I think the battle has now changed, has now find different ways and words. But I think the key point is that these have been years of change and evolution. Vane, you entered football at a time when there was no professional football for you. And what was it like to open up a whole new field? And as part of that path, you've been leading a lot. What's it like to enter a brand new field? I think we women have one very distinctive power, which is to dream about things we haven't seen before. You know, at home, everyone was into football, and no one ever, including myself, we never challenged the fact that football was for men in a way. And of course, my first sport was horse riding. I remember as a kid when I was little, 8 or 9 years old, I used to take part in competitions, and there's the bars that you need to deal with in horse riding, and they used to ask me whether I also played like my dad, who was a footballer. So, in a way, football had to do with giving up on my identity. Then I got into volleyball, and they told me, why don't you change sports? And it was my dad who said, listen, why don't you give it a shot? And eventually, the point was that there was no professional league at the time. Now you can go on social media, look at the news, run a Google search, and that's a whole lot of information. At the time, there was very limited visibility. The first official World Cup was in 1991, and I was born in 1995. So there was already something, but we wouldn't be able to see it because there was no visibility. And even though we didn't see it, we always had the dream, and we knew there was something. We didn't know exactly what it looked like, but at least there was a reference point. And it becomes that invisible collective reference for all of us, which we all know is there, although we don't know about the details. So we start building it step by step. And at the time, it was quite common to see women players who used to come to play here in the league. I was part of the generation that transitioned, and that helped give us some physical tools. The university league here was ideal to be able to go from amateur to professional. Here, you're first taught that you are a student and then an athlete. They prioritize your human being element. And if you don't meet certain academic standards, you just can't play. And there are very clear rules. And in Latin America, it's different, right? It looks like you choose. It's either studying or playing. Here, it's the opposite. You need to study in order to be able to play. And so, as part of the 3 or 4 years and of that process, you are equipped with a whole lot of tools, and we would start coming together with other girls that perhaps didn't have the same sort of opportunity. And we started to see a growth process in football. And in the national team, we had accountants, sports professionals, communicators, and lawyers. So when we had to talk about our evolution, the arguments obviously went to a completely different level, even compared to our male colleagues. And we looked at ourselves in the mirror of the United States, but also facing the task of adapting this to our own Latin and Colombian culture. So tell us more. What did that mean? Applying or conveying that to the Latin culture. What lessons, what challenges did you actually find? Well, the learning comes from the challenges. And one thing that holds true is as our education levels rose, it wasn't the case with our coaches, who are our leaders. So, curiosity is a fact. When curiosity is so what is curious is so straightforward in a way that's regarded as something that you shouldn't do. In football, you don't question, but in the world of academia, you do question because, of course, knowledge is a tool for you. So when we came and asked questions about why, they were really offended. And this was a discussion we also had at home with my dad, because I used to say, Dad, if I question what you're saying, it's not because I doubt you. It's rather the fact that I trust so much in you that I want more information. Because when I go onto the field and the referee gives the starting whistle, then I think the challenge is to be able to translate our curiosity into something that is related to valuing knowledge, and so that no one is gets to feel that they're being challenged or questioned. Yeah. And this was about no offense. We were, of course, questioning a system that hadn't included us. And leaving emotions aside, what can we do so as to start to be included? And when we made those points, in a way, it was perceived as a bit of an annoying or offensive point. Because after all, we're a team, including the players, the staff, the team, the coaches, and we don't want a communication breakdown. We don't want fear on any side. If you enter with trepidation, then it's very hard to have the conversations. You need to change the system. What improvements have you seen looking back? I found this, you know, perhaps the level of the coaches was different. Perhaps that continues to be the case. What things do you see still exist in the way of the hurdles, the barriers faced by players and women's football? And where do you see progress? Well, 6 years ago, the Colombian league lasted 4 months. So under the FIFA rule, the minimum length of a professional player, man or woman, is as long as the league lasts. So we had employment for 4 months. Now the league is a bit longer, it's about 6 months, but the teams have already started to work on a whole project, and most clubs offer 1 year contracts for nearly all players. So that has changed. And on television, there aren't that many parties you see in each season, but at least you can see them on YouTube, and you can also see the counter, and you can see the pictures being presented. So the visibility has changed. So you also get commentators. It's still one camera, so you may perhaps have the catch of the century, but the camera is not there, so you just see this tiny little dot flying, someone catching the ball. And this has to do with some of the considerations that prevent the product from growing and becoming even more appealing. Now, the contracts have been a huge step forward for us as players, as you can also develop a life project, build a family, and of course, motherhood is another point that's still work in progress. And FIFA doesn't yet have a return to the field program after pregnancy. Now, one step forward is that pregnancy is no longer treated as an injury, as used to be the case in the past. Now we have the motherhood, the maternity leave item. So that has been changing, and many players who've become mothers, especially in the United States, have been pioneering developments in terms of creating programs so as to find a, let's say, universal protocol for return to the field after pregnancy. And there's also more research being done on women's health in sport, especially for the past World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. There was an issue relating to broken cross ligaments, and that was terrible. Actually, there were about 20 or 30 players. It was really terrible, and they would actually miss the World Cup because of their injuries. And the recovery tools, on the other hand, were also different. You weren't given the ideal conditions to recover in order to be able to go and play again. And there's also a study which shows that depending on what point of the menstrual cycle you're in, you may be more liable to injury or less. And physical preparedness has also been changing. There are issues relating to knees and hips, which were previously not taken into account. So little by little, we've been getting to see an investment that leads to women players being better taken care of. And so that can be a life project choice. And yeah, that's looking at the inside of football. But of course, as always, there's also the external side of things. What would you say has changed, and where do we still need change off the field in other segments and sectors among citizens? outside football. What are the barriers have you encountered? What has helped you move forward? Well, much of the progress has enabled by visibility. Today, you can see kids in school, and when asked, for instance, who your favorite player is, many answer man or woman. Oscar Córdoba, right? Vanessa Córdoba. But actually, the fact that they ask is already a giant leap forward. And now, of course, there's the bias in AI. In English, you say the player. There's no difference between masculine or feminine. When you ask who the player that has scored the most goals in your team is, the answer used to be Cristiano Ronaldo typically, but now you can also see the effect of a campaign that has tried to tackle the bias. But for kids, it's only natural. You sometimes see kids with the jerseys of the English goalkeeper Mary Herbs or others. So for them, it's not at all strange. It may be a bit more unusual for adults, but not for kids. And we have also seen an interesting change going on in the way people perceive women's football. So it's much more quick-paced as a game, and it's more colorful, more appealing. What I think is still lacking is the fact that when you approach the brands to try and attract sponsors, there's the idea that we also need marketing. It's not just about social responsibility. The approaches are very different and they have a huge impact on the narrative when it comes to integrating women's football. And on the clubs side and federations, I would even say, it's about the way you sell women's football, but also football as such. And I think a major evolution is taking place with FIFA going into the States. Many people were objecting to the fact that the players came out of the tunnel one by one rather than all together. And football needs to evolve. And the United States has understood 100% that sport is entertainment. To us, it's still a passion, this irrational religion that makes us shout. But here in the States, they think about every detail from the minute you get to the stadium, the experience you have as a player, as a fan, when you go and sit down to watch football, whether it be football or baseball or American football. And women's football is trying to make to find a way in, because the traditional way of dealing with football doesn't sell women's football because our tools are different and the visibility of men's football comes through television. But in the case of women, that visibility is something we foster because we have tried to achieve that through social media. But if I can't tell a brand that the team will be on international television twice a week, okay, at least I can say, listen, with your team, you will be able to reach out to 1 million people through social media. So they're fully different products and very different opportunities too. And actually, I think the WNB here is supporting the beauty products industry. They have understood that through women's sport and basketball in particular, they are creating awareness linked to certain pillars and values that the women players represent, which adds quite a different value. And I think this is making it possible for us to recognize that and see it also as an opportunity to be able to sell more at the end of the day, which is something both clubs and brands look forward to. You mentioned men's football a couple of times. Is women's football equivalent to, is it a complement to, is it part of the same business as men's football? Is it the benchmark that women's football should follow? So how would you compare women's and men's football? Well, I think these are two different things. In fact, they're different but similar. In fact, football played by women as opposed to by men. That's the most or more neutral way to look at it. I think an opportunity is arising to change many things that men's football can no longer do in the traditional way. So being disruptive requires distinctive courage. And I think that is something lacking in men's football, although I'm not judging, because it's a very hostile environment. When you start fiddling with people's passion, I'm always surprised, even though I grew up in the world of football, you know, I think we could be perhaps not compliment, but we could perhaps be offering an opportunity to bring about those changes. And when it comes to the actual football, both are different styles, very different. And of course, they can be very colorful, the two of them. And you can't watch football played by women in the same way as football played by men. There are different conditions. And you don't need to go very far. Just switch on to Champions League, or, there are more games on TV, on YouTube too. And now with the World Cup coming up, a true spectacle they are.
Okay, so then you have people creating new teams, such as Internacional de Bogotá, or are they coming from other parts? Are they coming from the football or soccer played by men? Or what is the logic that they're implementing to promote this world, the world of women's football or soccer? Well, they really come from the men's soccer, trying to hold on to what women's soccer has done from that media revolution that they've carried out. They come with that desire, that wish, but women's soccer, and it's not only happening in new teams, it also is happening in traditional teams. For example, here in the United States, you have the Washington Spirit, which is a women's team. So basically, these are women's teams. In Latin America and in most countries, you have the institution with men's soccer, and then all of a sudden you had a little team here on the side, and that was the women's team. So it's a little bit of a lab. Let's try with the women and see if it works out or not, without thinking that our audience is also very different. A week ago, we played a double. What do I mean by that? We played Internacional de Bogotá against Millonarios and also the men. What happened? So they played the women's team first and then the men's team later. It becomes a 5-hour plan at the stadium. At the beginning, when we played, most of the stadium was empty because it's not that easy to go to the stadium for 5 hours. And to be honest, the infrastructure of the stadium is quite simple. You have two options in terms of food. If it rains, you get wet, and so on and so forth. So that really limits the entire experience. So during the first part of the experience, it was our game, and it was almost empty. Then it was the men, and it was very full. But we're reaching different audiences. And again, they want to take into account what women's soccer is doing to then try to apply it into men's soccer. I don't know if I made myself clear, but I do feel that within the club, within the institution itself, together with the men's team, we train at the same time, or rather, they start 1 hour earlier, then we start, then they go to the cafeteria, then we go, they go to the field, and later on we go. So, and then in terms of physiotherapy, that's where everyone meets, and that's a lot of people. So they basically give us different timing to make sure that we can make the best use of the space so that it doesn't get too crowded. But it's a whole new experience. It's also for me a whole new experience. Sometimes we need one more goalie, and you have someone from the sub 20 or sub 17, and we say, come on, help us, and come and join, be a goalie. And then you have the men from the professional team that are sitting down to watch because they're curious to see it. It's interesting. Sometimes they stop and they stand at the back, and there's a whole they start discussing whether the goal needs to be a little smaller. Sometimes one actually scores and you hear, wow, that was quite a goal. And then you have a new member and you can see the face of this guy who's from sub 20, and he's thinking, oh my goodness, they can't score if I'm the goalie. And then when the women score and he's the goalie, all of them laugh. And then they start saying, oh, that one was quite a goal. It's quite a social experiment on a daily basis if you watch it from that perspective. But they're also men are changing their perspective too. I have two questions from based on what you just said. You're taking your leadership beyond the field, the soccer field. Where could you apply this social experiment? For example, this that I learned in the field, I could apply it in this sector or in this other experience. And then my other question, I want to hear a little bit more about the discussion of whether the post need to be, or the goal needs to be smaller, the field needs to be smaller. I want to hear about that, those two questions. So the first question is, you said this is all a lab, it's a constant social experiment. Where could you else apply this type of social experiment? Outside of soccer. Well, I think in the business world, well, I haven't really been there. My sister is there, so we talk a lot about it. But I think sometimes if there's a conflict, for example, there's step by step how to do that conflict resolution. In soccer, we don't have that. It's truly informal. You have rules, you have paths, and they're there for something. They really make everything easier when you have everything very clearly established. Since we don't have it, it's a whole field of opportunity basically to see how you could do things. And when things become too formal, you lose a little bit of creativity in terms of how we solve situations. For example, not so long ago, there was this situation where the physiotherapist, that's all, we always have some sort of conflict. The men are winning and they feel like they're stars and we are one before last. So there's always that competition. If they win, we need to win. And if they win and we don't win, it really hits you. So all of a sudden I heard, they're angry at you. This is like school time, really. And I said, why are they upset with us? Because you didn't say, because not all the women players said hi to the men, because one looked at the other and I said, oh my God, no, I need to focus on whether the other team is scoring or not. I don't have to focus on whether I said hi or not, or yada, yada, yada. And that escalated very fast. And it happens very quickly because there's a big division between women's soccer and men's soccer. Not because we want it, but because that's the way it is. Women don't feel part of it. You have to be grateful if you're included. And men all of a sudden think, these girls came and took over. They took over our space. The structures are designed, or infrastructure rather, is designed only for men. So we come with this bias in our approach, and then when we come together, there's a little bit of tension. If you bring two teams together, it becomes like a school party. We're here, they're there, and you say, "Oh, hi." It's illogical. It's the world is mixed. You're many times sitting next to a man or a woman in the office. You go to the gym, and it's also for men and women. But in soccer, the reality is very different, and there's this fear, and it started escalating. And I said, no, 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 no. What did I do? I called the captain of the men's team, and I said, okay, let's talk. And he was quite concerned. And I said, I knew this was going to be an issue. And I said, Larry, don't worry. I just want to understand what made the men upset so that we can make the necessary changes. Talk to me. First, there was no one presented a complaint, because in the business world many times if you have a problem you talk to the person, and then if it's not solved then you escalate it. Here the issue escalated really fast, and all of a sudden we were called, excuse me, the men's team is very upset with all of you. First, talk to me, tell me what happened. Well, they didn't present a complaint. That's what I was told, at least, and I want to trust the information I got. And we realized that most of the time the things that they were concerned were not truly happening. It was just a matter of opening the door to have a conversation. I said, come on, let's talk. But sometimes when you have things that are too well established, you lose part of the bonding that you could do. So we ended up on the phone, and he said, I have a daughter and I really and truly love what you're doing. I want to help. And if something goes wrong, we women will be the ones affected. So let's be let's behave like adults and let's talk. And I think that could be applied in the world outside of sports. Yes, of course, we have to respect whatever steps are in place, but we cannot forget we're dealing with human beings. Everyone is feeling vulnerable, and we have to acknowledge that vulnerability and move forward. And the other question, the discussion about whether the goal needs to be bigger or not, the field, does it need to be bigger or not? Because that's applied in other things. For example, the work schedule, does it need to be the same or not? The demands for women, do they need to be the same or not? Is it important in soccer? Is it not? Maybe you're thinking, no, please do not bring me into this discussion. Where is it coming from? What's your position? What do you think? Well, in many sports, volleyball, basketball, tennis, the situation changes from one sport to another. My perspective in soccer is, let's not change the field or the goals. What would happen if a woman is lifting weights and they're right next to an average man that is going to the gym 3 times a week, and we make them compete with each other? Probably the woman who is training really hard will lift harder. The same thing with a runner, for example, if they are professionals versus an amateur. Sometimes they come to play, and it really is not that easy for men to play against women. So basically, your body moves in the direction that you want to. What has happened with women's soccer? Women, especially my generation, we did not have that training from the beginning. So we have a gap, a very big gap in terms of that athletic footprint in our bodies. And maybe that's why we're lacking that body shape, how strong we are, how fit we are. My generation has marked a before and after. Now girls have soccer schools. They're very young and they're playing soccer already, 4, 5, 6 years old. They already started playing more and more, and then it seems like the field is getting smaller and smaller, but it's not that. It's that our training was very different. That's in soccer in general. And then when you're talking about the goalie, my dad's generation had a specific coach for goaling. In female soccer, my generation started with that one generation later. So in terms of training, there's also a massive gap in that sense. It's not just standing there. The goal is managed as a triangle. It's the 2 posts plus you, and you have to adjust the angle. If I move forward, the angle is smaller. If I move backward, then the angle also changes, and so on and so forth. So if I move forward, you see the goalie a little bit smaller. But if you don't have this type of training, there will be very basic mistakes that will be made, or very bad mistakes that you will make. Same thing in terms of your fitness training. If I train to be faster, more agile, stronger, then obviously I will manage to do so. The thing is, since we did not get that training, people were saying, the goalie doesn't jump, she's not fast enough. But now if you go to the World Cup, you can see a woman kicking a ball out of the goalie through the corner. So the issue is not so much the goal, but the training that we were getting to be able to cover it. And it's something that we're continuously facing in the public sector, here, being here. We need to make sure that this is not an only women agenda. What role can men play? And I'm not talking only about the men's team. We're talking about the role they can play in soccer, but also in terms of more rights, equality. They are the other half, really. So they also have a very prominent role to play. I feel that there's a lot of bias. We have a bias we bring with an experience, with a history, and men, and likewise with men. And everyone is standing on their side, and we're missing the middle in terms of communication. What happened? For example, there was a very important team in Colombia, and the space for physiotherapy is where you get massaged, and they don't have to go to the third floor. No, don't go to the third floor because the bus is leaving. No, 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 you can't. If men are here, you cannot go in. And then you get very upset. And this time it was them who called us to talk. And we went there and we said, okay, tell us. You convened us, so tell us what's happening. And they said, well, for your own comfort, where we want you to go to the third floor so that you can be a little bit more comfortable. And I said, doctor, did you ask them if they're uncomfortable with us there? Because they could feel uncomfortable too. Did you ask us if we felt uncomfortable with the men around? No, you're just assuming that's the case. And then he said something, and I almost had a heart attack when he said this. I care so much about you that we are taking a course about sexual harassment and abuse. That was his answer. We care so much about you that we are taking that course. And I said, hey, I celebrate your desire to expand your horizons, your knowledge. However, that's not for us, that's for everyone. I think he didn't finish the program yet. He was missing a chapter of the program where that should apply for everyone, not just the women's team. But basically, we're not there yet. We're talking a lot from fear. We're acting from fear. We're not even talking from that place of fear. What could be done? What could men do? Well, come closer, and that way us women could also make it a little easier for them to understand. Rule number one, speaking in public, you have to understand who your audience is. And we're talking about 20, 50 people, but also one person. I need to understand who I'm talking to, and I understand where he is coming from. And hopefully he will do the same thing, but I can only control what I do, and I need to focus on that. I understand that men can actually contribute a lot from that perspective, being open to talk and taking into account our context. Moving on to another field, which has to do with mental health. From the outside, let's say, I've never been part of a professional soccer team, just the school team. And from the outside, you may think, wow, these are high performing players. It's a lot of pressure. How much do you talk about mental health, both in men's soccer and women's soccer? Is this an issue where maybe we could focus much more on? Do we need greater investment in mental health in soccer? Could that be, for example, one of the central topics in terms of development? Well, we talk about it because your performance depends on it. But so as a professional athlete, you are responsible of your own mental health and physical health. Soccer, the world of soccer wants you healthy because that's the only way you can perform at the highest level. Not because I'm a human being and they care about me as a human being. That's not their function. That's my responsibility. Therefore, obviously, starting from that point, you really need to work on your mental health. We're also taught that we are only soccer players. And slowly I've made I've come to terms with it, but sometimes for me it's difficult to think that at this point my team is training and I'm playing a different role right now. I'm doing another type of work. Am I being professional? Am I not? One, it's a different role, but I think that in the process to break with the stigma, things have started to change. So at the end of the day, we need to understand that professionalism comes from you, your own understanding of your responsibility over your own mental health, not because the team is taking care of it. That's not their function. Their function is to provide the team with all the tools they need to reach an objective. And your mental health is up to you. And me as a goalie, if I make a mistake, maybe the coach might sit me on the bench, and my value basically depends on that. And sometimes we are stripped of our creativity and the multifunctional nature of a human being. Sometimes you are just an athlete. Yes, you're a dad, you're a husband, but first and at most, you're an athlete. And that's why when athletes retire, many of them go into depression. There's a lot of family conflict during the season because your value is anchored on that. And that's why mental health is so difficult in the sports world. And we're measured by our performance and not by our well being. I could continue asking you many questions, but I want to open up the floor to everyone who is here. And Vane, if you want to ask something or add something, you're more than welcome. Any questions here? Please use the microphone because those connected and listening to the interpreters need you to use the mic. Thank you, Vanessa, for your generosity, and thank you, Diana, for opening up this dialogue. I'm curious. Soccer is immersed in FIFA. It's something very corporative. So I wanted to know your perspective. How is it to navigate those two worlds, the business one and the soccer one, taking into account that you are a player but a leader too, and you've pushed for many internal transformations? How do those two worlds live together, and what has FIFA done to adapt itself to the new context and what the women's soccer is asking for? Well, in terms of the corporate world, we don't really experience anything. Zero. For me, the corporate world is the normal. Is normal. I've never been part of the corporate world, but my mind, from my perspective, since I've always been there, it's normal. But in my career, there's nothing normal. You're constantly in pain. You experience a lot of things. You're under the sun all the time, under rain. We are playing on Monday, so we practice Saturday, Sunday. We travel Monday, and everything spins around being available on those days. Your life is what happens between a game and another game. It's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You lose track of time. You lose track of the day of the week. I really don't know what day it is today. It's very informal. It's excessively human. So you see the emotions, really, everyone's emotions on everyone's skin. It's very normal. It's everything is very superficial. You see sadness, frustration, wrath, and there's falls, there's hits. Some of them are very natural because of the movement itself, and there's violence in a way, so to speak. My dad works in ESPN and they were analyzing a play, if it was a red card or not. And he said, I don't think it's a red card because of this and that. He gave the entire explanation. If I wanted to hurt you, my foot would be this way. And it's like, ooh, how are you taught to hurt? Yes, of course. Not so much about, it's not so much about hurting the other, it's about understanding how I'm going to be hurt. So that's the level of hostility that you experience in the sport. So that world is only seen by management, and in countries like ours, informality is quite a blurry line along the way. Any other question? One, two. Can you hear me? Okay. First, thank you to you and Diana for coming. It was very exciting to listen to you. I have a comment and a question. First, the comment very quickly. As I said, the way you talk is very clear, very transparent, and that is why I think it's important to understand that players are human, and at the end of the day, in women's soccer, I feel like there's a little bit of lack of knowledge, understanding that the start point of women is different, the challenges are different, and I love what you said about the product that has to be handled in a different way because women face different challenges. Thank you, really. It was amazing. And now my question. In what areas do you think we need more research in order to try to push down the barriers, the challenges that we're facing? Is it in terms of shoes, in terms of contracts, work contracts, in terms of sick leave, and so on and so forth? What do you think could be done to reach more equality? Now, thank you. Thank you. I feel honored. Well, in terms of research, we need research everywhere. Any type of research is welcome, even in men's soccer, because there's much more to explore. More than gathering data, it's about finding the right people to interpret the data, because otherwise you just figures. I think for me, it doesn't help to know that a goalie runs 10 kilometers in a game. I normally do 3, but what do I do with that data? What do I do with information? So I hope the research also comes with a little bit more analysis of the data, because right now we have a GPS with us. You have the Whoop, but for me, recovery, it's on 40 something because I traveled through the night. What do I do with that? Okay, it says 45, but what does that mean with me? I need to focus on food, on hydration, and lost sleep is not recovered, but then I need to sleep a little bit more. But if I just take 45% of recovery, then it takes me nowhere. The shoes that we use, there are types of cleats that are a little more rounded and others that are a little bit more pointy in a diagonal. What happens? The ligament ruptures happen because when you turn the cleat, it sinks. So maybe you can have the entire foot on the ground or just the tip. And if the cleat is round, then my foot will turn a little bit more flowy than if the cleat is like a triangle. The location of the cleats affect that. That has been developed even in terms of the size of the shoes too. We've seen differences. Now you have cleats for women, and that's highly linked to the uniforms. Usually they were in the past they were given the same one for men and women. I'm a big woman, but we are not small men. We are big women. And they say, ah, no, so for women it's only S or M. And I say, oof, I don't fit. If I lift my arms, the t-shirt, it will be like a crop top. I just don't fit, and I'm not small woman. And I suffer a lot trying to find the right shoes. In Colombia, I cannot find the right shoes. My size is 9. In terms of sizes, L, XL, I can't fit one leg, so the uniforms look really weird, and that makes us look less athletic. We look heavy. No, we need to improve that. And then it's a matter of taste. The short sometimes uh, have to be different. Men's hips are narrower, ours is wider. So when you run, you can feel the short stuck to your skin and it's stopping you. So sometimes you put it up and they say, ah, it's because you want to show your leg. And it's like, no, dude, it's because something's stopping me from running right here. So the uniform has to be adjusted for women. And I don't know if we need more research, but it's important to talk to women and understand what is good for them. Having a white uniform is beautiful, but if you have your period, is very nerve-wracking for a woman. In England, I think there was a campaign to feel proud of your menstruation, and they went out with the shorts a little bit stained with blood. But I think it's important to have some sort of waterproof material so that it doesn't seep through. I think there's research, it's starting there, but we have a long way to go in that sense. And that will continue to happen slowly, but it has a lot to do with our physical health, and we will see a difference between men and women.
Absolutely. I have three actually. Sorry. Let me fire away. Main trends you see in sport, platforms, formats. What do you see going forward? And who's the best in the world? And by the way, uh, a bald guy is not just a hairless guy, right? Right. Well, to us, when we in Spanish say pelado, it means a young guy, right? It doesn't mean bald. Platforms. TikTok has been a major ally to develop women's sports. So has been Instagram. Now there is a whole trend towards TikTok. And a couple of years ago, I went to the World Football Summit in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and the president of the Saudi League spoke. It was Cristiano and other big shots had been there already. And they said to us, our big challenge is to sell 90-minute football in 15 seconds. That's the big challenge because you scroll and there's this little pass move super goal, which they show in slow motion, what with the music and so on. So you no longer see the 90 minutes, you see the 15 seconds of the highlight of a specific game, or perhaps a minute long highlights compilation for the whole party. So TikTok is one of those things, as well as Instagram. And in the States, we now start to see a trend on LinkedIn. And I hope to be able to do that too, because football is also a job. So now I'm on my flight back, and LinkedIn is running a platform because there is more awareness regarding the transition from active to retired. I can also be an active sports person, an investor, a business person. So we see sports people starting to use LinkedIn a lot more. And, the world of fashion, entertainment, and music is also permeating the world of sport, not just as a platform, but as an industry. And there was a third point, right? Ah, yes, the best fans. Well, at the country level, well, I can't be impartial here. Let me be quite frank. I think Argentina is a whole different level. In good times, in bad times, it's a different level altogether. They do really buy into it. If things go wrong to us, it's like, oh, everything is wrong, but not the case in Argentina. It's crazy. It might be part of their culture. I would say that Argentina, yeah, tops. Can it take just a little longer? Can I? 10? Vanessa, thank you very much for sharing your stories and experiences. And Anna, thank you for this. It's very enriching. I have a 7-year-old daughter who got here when she was 18 months old to the States, and me, as a Colombian father, would never imagine she'd play football. I really never thought she would get into it, and she loves it. And I see her skills, and she's training. And well, in Argentina, when you go to Buenos Aires, the football 5, 7 fields are full of girls playing. In terms of communication, which is one of my areas, what communication strategies would you suggest for these new generations, starting by the parents? Do you think, or how do you view this going forward? Well, I can relate to that because I also started with my dad. It didn't work. It just didn't work. It was awful. He was a great goalkeeper, but a lousy trainer. Sorry, Dad. And I think communication becomes valuable once the question comes up. Now, I don't know what needs 7, 8, or 10-year-old girls are having. Um, at least in the States, I might have a bit more of an idea for Colombia. But it would be good to ask her, what are you actually getting to feel? What bothers you? Because when we can pinpoint what it is that bothers us, we can identify our values, which is what really is going to matter in life. And that also defines your life trajectory. So apart from the actual sport, it's about trying to understand her view as a whole. Sports will always be an excuse. So I think it's about listening to her and asking her, uncomfortable questions, you know, are important because now she's growing in a world where she has a professional league. She can also see women players that look like her as well. Because in the past, you typically used to have the Scandinavians, but now you have these Latin players as well, Colombians. And if they look like me or I resemble them, then it's less abstract. So I would ask her without any kind of fear, have you felt a difference or what do you think about um, men's football? I would ask her the questions and listen to what she says. I'm sure she will come up with some surprising answers. Yes, they're letting me know I can't take another question now, but Vanessa, thank you. Amazing. How refreshing. This has been a treat. Let's keep this vibe and passion to move this forward. And this shows that we can definitely tackle this through different angles. You're always most welcome, and let's hope you'll come earlier than in 6 years' time. We want to listen to you. Honestly, this has been a treat, a great game. Thank you so much. Thank you.